There is no longer any question that there are top people around President Trump. We're talking here about senior appointees, people who President Trump put into the White House and the administration, not some shadowy deep state operatives who are trying to rein him in, who are trying to check some of his impulses, who are trying to blunt him from taking certain drastic actions, particularly in the area of foreign policy. And as part of that effort, this has obviously come up before, they are leaking, or people on their behalf are leaking, so that the press knows and therefore the public knows just what the president has in mind. Exhibit A, and this is just a remarkable story, in yesterday's New York Times, here's the key paragraph, the key sentence actually. Last year, President Trump suggested a move tantamount to destroying NATO, the withdrawal of the United States. And what's fascinating here is, first of all, the White House is not denying the story. A senior official said, oh, if you look at what Trump said 6 months ago, strong commitment to NATO, U.S. not withdrawing, that's our comment, but didn't say that on numerous occasions the president has spoken privately of withdrawing from NATO. Now, it's not a secret that the president, first of all, has a rather low opinion of NATO. He's gone to some of these meetings. He's disrupted. He's demanded that the member countries contribute more to the joint defense, and he feels that they're getting a free ride from the United States. He looks at these kinds of alliances mostly from a financial point of view rather than how much is it contributing to world stability and all of that. Secondly, he obviously is not a fan of treaties and global alliances in the first place. In the 2 years he's been president, Trump has pulled out of TPP, out of the Iran nuclear deal, and of the Paris Climate Change Accord. So some of this is not secret, but the idea that he would go so far, at least in private, he hasn't done it, and that's part of the story too. But as to talk about whether or not the U.S. should pull out, it's pretty remarkable when you consider this is a 70-year-old alliance that has been remarkably successful in almost everyone's estimation. In this story, it says that several times in 2018, according to these senior administration officials, Trump said privately he wanted to withdraw from NATO. Current and former officials who support the alliance said they feared Mr. Trump could return to his threat because the allies are not spending as much on military as he had wanted. And it says that the National Security Team, including Jim Mattis, who's now gone as Defense Secretary, but John Bolton, who Trump brought in as National Security Advisor because he was much more in sync with the president's agenda, have been scrambling to keep American strategy on track and to keep the NATO alliance intact because, again, I'm reading from the Times story here, breaking up the alliance would drastically reduce Washington's influence in Europe and could embolden Russia for decades. Now, Russia is the key word here because while this story is a very legitimate story, and by the way, if the president were actually to try to do this, I believe a bipartisan majority in Congress would block any withdrawal from NATO, though it would send shockwaves around the world on par with Brexit. But there are a lot of Republicans who have the one issue they've been willing to stand up to Trump on, many of them, has to do with Russia and has to do with Western alliances. But the key thing here is Russia, because once this story was published, a number of commentators, anti-Trump pundits, seized on this and said, aha, this is once again Donald Trump kowtowing to Russia. This is what Russia wants. It's like the Syrian pullout. It's like other things. It's because Putin has something nefarious on him. There's absolutely no evidence of that. Or he just is taking a very soft position toward the Kremlin. And it would be a gift to Vladimir Putin, but I don't think that that's Trump motivation, and I don't think they ought to speculate about whether Trump is doing this to help Russia. He's an America First guy who feels like we're doing too much on trade deals and environment and military alliances around the world. He even wants to pull troops out of South Korea, which most experts think would be a disaster given the continuing threat from North Korea. So I don't know what's more stunning. The fact that Trump has privately talked about this, maybe he was venting, maybe he wasn't. The fact that this was leaked to the New York Times, or the fact that the people around him, what used to be called the adults in the room, are stopping the president from doing this and want the press to know about it. That is part of their strategy. That's why the story has been leaked to the president's least favorite newspaper.